Connor Tomkies. Welcome to Build to Sell Radio.
Hey, John. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. Tell me a little bit about SupportNinja. How did this company come about?
So SupportNinja is a outsourcing company, which I didn't think was like a cool thing at the time. I thought it's like very practical. It's like you're doing work just somewhere else, right? And I had another entrepreneur say, like, how did you get into like this sexy business? And I was like, it wasn't 8 years ago. So it's essentially an outsourcing company. We had a bad experience in the past with some of my previous companies working overseas. And we just wanted to make a company where the culture really lined up with what we see in the United States and the companies that we like to work with.
So if I'm a small business, I might hire SupportNinja to handle my basic inquiries that come in, deal with some social media stuff. Like what am I hiring SupportNinjas to do? What kind of activities would they perform?
The main thing that we got started with was customer experience, and then we expanded into other areas. I think for us, it made sense that originally you could hire only people that were inside your city or inside your town. And then with remote culture being more dominant, you could hire people from more cities and your talent pool expanded. And the question that we were asking is like, you could hire the best talent anywhere in customer service or in development or in marketing. And so why wouldn't you? Was the main question that we were asking. So it wasn't so much from like a cost saving standpoint, even though that's definitely there, but it's like from a talent standpoint, there's like the top universities in Colombia and the Philippines and Romania that you can start hiring from, and you can get top-notch marketing talent or top-notch CS talent, essentially.
Got it. And so you were basically, it was a bit of an arbitrage play, right? You were charging U.S. North American companies a rate and buying that labor at a cheaper rate, and then making this the kind of difference. Is that basically the business model?
100%, yeah. So there's that arbitrage between different countries, and then there's also a little bit of a arbitrage in terms of the skill that you can get for that wage rate, right?
Right. And what were you finding on a gross margin basis? Like if you were charging someone out at $50 an hour in the US, like what were you paying for that labor in a developing country?
So this is interesting. I think the average gross is around 60%. So the gross margin is pretty good. What is interesting is that over time, there used to be more of an upfront investment in infrastructure and the things that you need to run an outsourcing company. But think about all the changes that have happened in the past 20 years. Like you used to have hard lines. Now you don't anymore. You used to have these big facilities. After the pandemic, people are more comfortable with remote. Each of these is like departments and overhead that used to eat in between your gross and your net margin. And so like your gross might be 60, but your net might be around 20. And then if you're a fast growing company, and SupportNinja was growing 80% year over year, and you're reinvesting all that stuff before you know it into computers and facilities and different departments. And so I think that's pretty tricky, especially whenever you're navigating that exit.
Yeah. And so you guys were, so let me understand the business model. So there's you pay for the labor, so your gross margin roughly 60%, and then you've got to pay for the company itself. So below the line stuff like OpEx and marketing and all that jazz. Got it.
Yeah. It's actually pretty immense. I mean, if you think about it, SupportNinja had 14 different departments, and one of those was operations.
Wow.
Right. So IT, HR, recruiting. You have these facilities that need to be managed, and they have a high level of security to deal with a lot of personal information. So
yeah, I think there's a ton.
There's a lot. Yeah.
What kind of EBITDA margins would you guys do in a good year?
I think a good year for an outsourcing company is really that kind of 20%. Like it's like a lot of companies, if you can get that 20% kind of EBITDA margin, and if you're growing more than 20% year over year at scale, so like north of $50 million in top line revenue, then that's a really healthy company.
So did you guys hit the 20?
Yes. And so that's one of those things where it's like adjustments, right? Like we invested so much when we were bootstrapped, right? So we didn't have any outside capital coming in. So at the end of the year, we would be like, we have this much money, we're buying computers, we're reinvesting into the company. And what's good about SupportNinja is that we had a really good CAC as far as some of our different marketing channels.
Customer
and so we knew exactly.
Folks who don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. So we knew exactly where to spend our money.
Got it. And so who's the we? Like, just describe the group that own the company.
Yeah, so there is three partners: Craig, me, and Cody originally, and then Cody um, found out it wasn't for him, and that was one of the impetuses around the exit process to BV, Boston Ventures, 2 years ago. And then Craig and I stuck around, and we led the company, and we had a team of 9 on the leadership team and a team of 4,000 people overall. So
Wow.
it's a pretty large organization.
So this 4,000 different people working in developing countries that you would hire for different contracts. Is that right?
Yeah, and some of them are developing and some of them are not. So like we had offices in Ireland and we have offices here in the United
Really?
States. Yeah, and so it's very much matching like the best talent to the right requirement. And there's different things that different countries are known for. Romania has amazing developers and really good technical education. And so it's just really finding where does that niche kind of fill in and where's the best place to build that team.
Yeah, it's funny. We did an interview. Gosh, it was probably 4 weeks ago with a guy who built uh, a marketing analytics firm to use a vague term, and he found a ton of great people in Colombia, South America, and just incredible talent in that market. It's curious to me though, because given how much like how many marketplaces are out there now, I guess one of your competitors must have been like sites like Upwork, where if the business owner wanted to just find a discrete skill set, he or she probably could have done that through Upwork. Like, did you think of Upwork as a main competitor, or were there others that were more direct?
I remember this customer coming to us and they were like, we love Upwork, but we want a centralized place to be able to pay everyone and to manage those people. And so that's where we kind of came in, is we were in between that sliding scale of like Upwork. And on the other side, you have like Accenture and TELUS and Teleperformance and these big giants that have these massive team sizes. And
Hmm.
so as far as that sliding scale of like control and vetting that you have for your team, that's kind of where we fit in. And we were, for many people, we were like the first step to outsourcing. Like if you were relatively new to outsourcing, you would start with us, right? And so we would grow by working with these fast growing tech companies. And I'm not sure if you call it like the barnacle and the whale, or like as globalization becomes more of a thing and these companies that we're working with are growing, that's where SupportNinja kind of fit in.
So walk me through the exit. It sounds like you alluded to it earlier that there were three of you as partners in this business. Um, One partner decided that they needed out. Uh, Kind of where were you in terms of revenue at the time, and maybe talk a little bit about how that impacted you as a partnership.
Yeah, for sure. It's a little tricky. And I think if you were to go to like a Vistage or EO or a meeting of entrepreneurs, probably half the people at that table are navigating some type of cap table issue or working with
Mess.
partners. And it's hard, right? Because the cap table is one of those things that's really challenging to change. And I'm focusing a lot on that now with operator equity, is helping people fix their cap table issues and navigating that. And we had three partners, and me and one of the partners were very involved in the day to day, and the other one was not. And so it's a little challenging whenever that you want that person to also have a good exit and have a good experience. But on the other hand, it doesn't quite necessarily make sense for them to keep that cap table position. And so whenever you're looking at how do you kind of navigate that process, it's tricky. Like the emotions are really high, like ego is involved, and it's hard to make everyone happy. And me and my other partner tried to buy out the previous partner. He wasn't interested in like the terms that we were putting together.
What kind
And
of terms
then
did you get? What
background,
kind of terms did you offer?
it was more like, hey, like hold on to some equity, right? And we'll continue to grow this thing. But we want to pay out this remainder of equity over the next like 3 years. Like we have enough profitability coming through. We think we can scale this thing. And in the long run, it would have been better probably for all of us, because the company went from 0 to just shy of 70 million in around 7 years. And it's interesting because there's a sweet spot depending on your market and who the buyers are. So at a certain point, you'll find that you'll get a better multiple whenever you're north of $10 million as far as like revenue. And that's true for a lot of industries. But at a certain point, the number of people that can buy you drops off. And so there's kind of like the sweet spot in the middle where there's a lot of buyers and you can possibly get a higher multiple. But if you cross a certain point, then your EBITDA multiple can go down.
Yeah, interesting. That's and we had Adam Coffey. Have you met Adam? Have you had him on your show?
No, I haven't. No.
He's a good person to interview. I'd encourage listeners to go back and listen to him. He wrote the book, The Private Equity Playbook, but he talks a lot about the stages of private equity, and like there's a tranche of companies that like buying companies with at least $1 million of EBITDA. And then there's another tranche of companies that are, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it's like 5 million in EBITDA, then 10. And it's like this triangle. And to your point, the further you go up, the lesser firms there are at the top of the pyramid. There are lots of firms that do deals with companies with $1 million of EBITDA, but fewer as you go up the pyramid. So it's interesting. Maybe worth listening. But in your case, you guys were growing fast and attracted a really great multiple. How did they structure the deal? So you had this partner who wanted out. Like, how does he or she just get to ride off into the sunset and take their cash? Or like, did they get a lower valuation because they were leaving? Or how does that all work?
There was a little bit of a sunset situation. Yeah. So this partner was able to exit and have a good exit, which is fantastic and good for them. And for me and the other partner, we negotiated like a bonus for the transaction that was going through, and we took some chips off the table, and then we rolled over a big portion of our equity.
Got it. And were you resentful that you didn't get to ride off into the sunset? Was there like an element of like, wait a minute, I'm like getting to hold the bag here?
It's a little tricky, and it's hard to have feelings like that because on one hand, like one partner got to leave and gets their time back, but on the other hand, I was learning a lot. And like the difference between who I was 2 years ago and who I am now is I've built a skill set where I can do it again. I understand what it takes to build $100 million company and what it looks like to scale to 4,000 different employees, and to have 2 years to be able to learn that and work with a great team and understand what that when everyone's like clicking and what that hum it kind of feels like that is, I don't have any regrets. I'm all right.
That's awesome. And what was the biggest difference between operating independently, the three partners? I'd be curious to know like how you approached decisions differently with private equity backing. Like for folks, again, most of our listeners have not done a transaction yet. And maybe many of them would be contemplating doing a majority recapitalization with a private equity group. They've heard all the horror stories, right? Of, the mercenary financier that comes in and, scrapes all of their employees out and so forth. But like, what did you find in reality that was different about being private equity backed?
There's a couple things that I like, and I think I should highlight those. So one is the mentality and the mindset that they have whenever they look at deals. I really appreciate understanding where they stood, right? Is like, you understand that they want this multiple on their invested cash, and their goal is like that number. You understand where you fit in their portfolio, and you understand how to communicate and how to speak in their language. I really appreciate that aspect of it.
Do they refer to this acronym of MOIC? Did you hear they kind of talk MOIC all the time?
I've never heard it said MOIC.
Okay, multiple invested capital. That's kind of the I think it's the lingo. I'm not a private equety guy, so I don't know. But
it just sounds funny, right? It just sounds a little.
It sounds a little bit weird. Yeah,
it sounds a little
MOIC,
weird.
I think is the acronym. So anyway, so they kind of approach things on a MOIC basis. That's their sort of lens through the world.
Right. And I appreciate that because on one hand, whenever you're working with maybe another board or like with a group of co-founders, there's a lot of emotions involved and everyone's coming at it from a different standpoint, and different board members on a private equity board might have different viewpoints, but in general, they're pretty aligned as to where they want to go, and you understand where their horizon is. Right. And so I like that. I also like the discipline around having a board meeting every quarter. And whenever I buy or invest in a business now, I try to take some of the things that I liked when I worked with a private equity firm and try to apply it on a lighter basis. I don't want them to create 20 or 90 different slides, but I do want them to get used to that discipline of thinking, where is the exit? Where is the company in relation to where I want to go? Having that quarterly discipline around what they're doing. So I think it's helpful.
Did you ever get a sense of what their hurdle rate was on MOIC? Like what kind of multiple on investment capital they wanted to achieve on a specific investment?
I am going to pull this out, and it's probably wrong, but I'm thinking around 3.2 would be my guess.
Yeah, I've heard something similar to that. It's obviously much lower than a venture capitalist would look for, the home run 10x, but I do think it's something in that neighborhood for most PE firms, but I could be corrected, I'm sure, and will be. So part of the way they jack up their MOIC or their multiple on invested capital is through debt. Did you get a sense of how much debt they applied on SupportNinja in order to buy you guys and fund your growth?
So I'm pulling on memory again. I think that they did pull from the fund directly for the initial purchase, but with SupportNinja, we are like the platform, and then we're finding other companies to roll in, right? And in which case, our entity is shouldering the debt of the acquisitions that we're doing, right? And so there is debt, but it's in the form of like a platform play. We're shouldering the debt from the companies that we're adding on.
Let me see if I understand that. So you acquire a company, another BPO, and you borrow money to do that, and the guarantor of the money is SupportNinja? That's
right, yeah.
And SupportNinja, your cash flow is going to pay down the debt effectively, or pay the debt to carry the...
Right. And ideally, if you find the right purchase, if you do the right EBITDA multiple, the cash from the acquisition should more than cover the servicing of the debt.
Have you ever looked back with your partner and thought, maybe we could have got debt, done this without the PE group? Like maybe we didn't need them after all. Like, do you guys ever think about that at all?
From a growth standpoint, if we had not taken, because essentially they were helping finance a partner, right? So we could have hit that milestone with how we were essentially. But that being said, being able to finance that much cash and go through mezzanine financing, finding the right banker, that's really hard for a group of founders. That's really hard for a group of founders pre-exit. Now, if you have sold a company before, and if you're connected to other post-exit founder folks, if you have the right connections, then yeah, you can figure out how to finance a transaction, maybe do like a mini syndicate to like make everything kind of square, and then do a cap on potential upsides. So that way you can recoup some of your equity. Like there's a lot of different things that you can do there to kind of structure that. But for where we were 2 or 3 years ago, that's a very hard thing to do. It's a tall ask.
Yeah. We talked a little bit before hitting record about telling your employees. And I guess in your case, there would have been your direct employees that had a SupportNinja paycheck, but there's also this whole community of outsourcing partners that you also have. How did you go about telling them that one partner was leaving and your private equity group was kind of coming in to majority recap? You were like, there's a lot of complex stuff going on there, and there's a whole bunch of employees. How did you go about telling them?
One thing that I loved about SupportNinja is that we recorded a video every Friday. So we recorded a video like, here's what's happening inside the company. We call it the Not So Friday update, and there's like over 100 of these things, right? So like there's like almost like a video journal around this. And there's also, we had like our own internal like kind of network that we were able to cascade messages. And so we over communicated a lot, and we planned that communication out ahead of time. As far as the partners, a lot of the team worked a lot with me and the other partner directly because we were involved in the day to day, and the other partner wasn't. So as far as like the impact to the team, it was very low. And whenever we brought on PV, we were like, hey, we're scaling, and that ended up being 100% true. And that we're going to be able to do cooler things. We're going to be building these offices, and the offices are going to be fantastic. And the offices had like a coffee bar kind of speakeasy thing, a video game play. Like these were like fun spaces that we were able to build out because we were hitting that scale phase. And so there wasn't a lot of disruption in terms of like the day to day. What is cool for a lot of the employees is that we issued a ton of stock options, and they also had a PTEP on it, so a post-termination execution period. So some of the people that helped get us to that exit were able to walk away with something, even if they had left the company within a certain time frame. So it was really cool that we were able to see a bunch of employees kind of walk away and start their own businesses.
I've never heard that acronym before. Can you just describe that again? You call it a PTIP?
Yeah, neither did our lawyer. We had to explain it to him. So it's a post-termination execution period, PTEP. And so essentially one thing I was struggling with is like, let's say that you're key and instrumental and growing a company for 4 years, but the company sells in year 5. And like you leave for another job or something like that, you weren't any less instrumental in those 4 years that you were there. And we also promised you equity in lieu of a salary a lot of times, right? And a lot of companies, they don't really inform the employees of like, hey, these are options and here's how you execute on them. And a lot of times those options don't mean anything, right? And so to counteract that and to make them mean something, we put in place a post-termination execution period. Depending on how long you are with the company, similar to like a vesting schedule, you get a vesting as to like, if you're with the company for 4 years, let's say that you have a post-termination execution period of 2 years. So the company sells within those 2 years, then you get a check. Or if you're only with the company for 1 year, it might be for 6 months or something like that. So like, I can't remember exactly what the sliding scale was for the PTEP, but there was a way that we kept track of everyone and their equity. And then we paid out that equity even after they left the company.
Okay. And to be clear, that was a unique clause that you put into your options agreements that would be non-standard. It was something that you wanted to put in to kind of recognize people, whether they were with the company or not with the company at the time of exit. Is that correct?
That's 100% it. Yeah, the lawyer didn't know what it was. Post-term, I'm looking to see if I can even type it into Google and whether it comes up with anything. Post-termination execution plan or something like that.
Well, neither of us clearly are lawyers, but we'll encourage people to check it out and get their lawyer if they want to. That's a philosophical thing, because for some entrepreneurs, they'd be like, no, like, you know, you got to you're like, you can't hit a triple and say you got a home run. Like, you're on third base, you left the company, we sold a year later. It was your prerogative. You left, you walked away from your options. Other people are like, hey man, like, I brought you to the dance. I was there from the beginning. I took a risk with you when you were nothing. I left, yeah, but I should be on it. So it's very philosophically two very polarizing points of view, but completely different points of view. I've seen both.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what I'll do in the future, but I don't regret doing that. And I think also like part of the bonus or some of the pieces that we took on top, instead of like reissuing to ourselves, we took that and applied it to the employee base. So we were able to widen the pool as part of the transaction. And so it means a little bit less cash for us personally, but it means pretty profound things to those that are able to take part.
I would imagine. And I want to pick up on something you said around the Friday video. This is fantastic and really interesting. So, like, how scripted was this? Because the one thing that came to mind for me, to be honest, was, oh man, like, what if that video got into the wrong hands? Like, what if it got posted to social and you're like, you know, putting some fairly confidential stuff out there in the Friday video? For it to be meaningful in any way, it would have had to have been, you know, relatively confidential stuff. How did you guys kind of protect yourself in putting together the Friday video?
I was tempted to almost post it on LinkedIn. I was like, here's what we're doing, and being that level of transparent. And we never went that far, right? But I don't think we were that worried about it. And with the outsourcing space, we worked with like a lot of different outsourcing providers as partners. Like, we had a list of 25 different partners, and we would send referrals to other people. They would send us referrals. And I would talk very candidly about what we were working on and what our concerns were and what we're developing. And if they were able to beat us based on some of the things that we were sharing, then we deserve to be beat, right? So it wasn't so much of coming from like a place of scarcity, more abundance.
Yeah, I hear similar kind of themes around this kind of like what's it called, developing in public or building in public.
Building in public, yeah.
Building in public, yeah. That's something I don't really get at all, but that's probably
I think it's fun and it's
through.
a powerful thing. I mean, if you look at, do you know Morning Brew and Alex?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
He's a good example. So like he's posting on LinkedIn and he's like, I'm thinking about company names. What do you think? And then 2 days ago, he posted his tech stack and then everyone else was posting their tech stack. And it's a fun idea. I'm making this podcast called Made It, which is like after the exit. What does that look like? And I posted different album art. I'm like, pick 1 through 7. What do you think is fun? And it gets people a little bit more involved in what you're building.
Yeah. No, I get that. Maybe it's, just from a different era, but I find the confidential stuff like when people post, like our MRR this month is like $7 or whatever. It's like, dude, just keep that to yourself.
We don't need to know. There's some stuff you don't need to know.
Yeah. Exactly.
But candidly, I mean, like if you think about outsourcing in the space that this particular company was in, right?
Yeah.
The previous company was Dog Genetics. There's a little bit more like nuance there, but with outsourcing, it's 100 like different small decisions that you have to make on a day-to-day basis. It's a operational grind of optimizing 14 different departments a little bit more each day, right? And so the secrets that is that we're just able to execute, right? Like the secret is that we were able to build the systems and the communication and the alignment within an organization to be able to scale. And that's a hard thing to copy. If you're able to, if people are like, oh, this video is a cool idea, I want to do a video for my company every Friday, more power to you. You should do that. Yeah.
It's all in the execution, the Kaizen, and the kind of continuous improvement philosophy. Tell me about life after BV. So they came in, a private equity group. You took a little bit off the table and rolled some. To the extent that you're comfortable sharing, what happened? Did you then exit the company completely? Do you still hold some shares? Like maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I stayed on as CEO of the company for a year and a half, 2 years. We grew the company from 14 to a little bit less than 70 million in revenue. We grew opened up multiple different countries and new sites, and we developed the product further. And that was really cool to see. And I think what's interesting with a private equity firm is that they have a horizon. You know that the company is going to go through another transition. And so the question is, do you want to stay with that transition? If so, then that's okay. But then you're going to be with that next company for a year or two. And if not, then you need to make sure that that other CEO is in place and set up for success. And in my case, I had a chief operating officer, Craig, who was fantastic. And he's the CEO of SupportNinja now. And I stepped down in June of last year. And so as far as that experience, that's probably the best outcome. Like it's good for employees, it's good for company culture, it's good for continuing like the plan and the track that we're on. And from my standpoint, I get to touch base with the company every quarter. I'm still on the board. I just check in, see if I can help wherever I can. It is hard. And like, as far as like the transition, I'm constantly thinking about the company. Like I would go to bed and be thinking of things, right? And then wake up in the middle of the night and it doesn't go away.
And you've retained your equity, so you're hoping for that quote unquote second bite at some point when they go and sell. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm their biggest cheerleader. So
go SupportNinja.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, and I want to pick a little, hopefully not a scab, but there's something that you said which was I found fascinating, and that is that you're kind of grooming the COO. The COO takes over. They're now CEO, yet you're still kind of at night thinking about ideas for the company. What kind of friction is there between you as a shareholder with a significant portion of your wealth tied in this business that you no longer control and the CEO who, frankly, you know probably better than anybody where their blind spots are? Like, that's got to be hard to keep your mouth shut at times. Like, as a shareholder, like, that's got to be tough.
It is tricky. And the board meetings are also interesting in that you want to speak up more. But if anything, you jot down notes, right? And you can't say everything that comes to mind. And I think it's interesting because in a way that we had a pretty long partnership and we filled each other's blind spots, right? And so he was more on the operation side. I was focusing more on the sales and marketing side. And so in a way, there's still like the leadership team is still there, and he has the support structure to be able to fill those gaps now. So it's hard to watch sometimes as far as like, but as a good CEO, you normally have to be okay with things that they might not be your answer, but they are a answer, and they have talented people that are very capable at executing on those things. And sometimes that's even better than what you would imagine. So I think that there's something to that too.
Yeah. And what's the equity holding? So you've got equity, BV has equity. Like, do you have the kind of controlling vote? Or I'm assuming BV has about the majority, so they can kind of outvote you if it came to it. Hopefully it never does, but.
Yeah, so BV has control of the board and has control of the company. Craig and I each have individually less than 20% of the company. And then there's a like equity pool for the employees. But BV, as a private equity firm, if they buy a majority share in the company, and it's true for every BV company or private equity company, they normally vote as a block. So whoever the managing partner is and whoever's on that board, the members that are represented by that private equity firm vote as one.
Got it. Makes sense. Well, I hope that whenever the next transaction comes, it's even bigger and better than the first one, but it sounds like it was a tremendous success all around. And I really appreciate you sharing it. Where can people reach out to you, Connor, if they wanted to say hi on social media? Where is the best place to do that?
Yeah, so I'm Connor Tomkies on Instagram and X or Twitter, I guess, if that's whichever one you prefer. And yeah, I'm around. So if you guys need anything, there's also operatorequity.com that you guys can reach out to, and there's a contact form there.
Awesome. And we'll put all of Connor's contact information made at the podcast, the private equity group, and the Instagram links at the show notes at builttosell.com. Connor, thanks for doing this.
Good to talk, John. Talk soon.